Commissioner Andrew Coy. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Andrew.
Yes, we hear you.
Wonderful. I appreciate being able to dial in by phone as I'm traveling today. But as I'm dialing in by phone, I can't see some of the other features in the Teams functionality. I know we're approaching time here, but if I could ask for some help either from the board office, from Tanisha, or from my fellow commissioners, if that was Commissioner Ames Messenger that I heard on as well.
Yes, it is. Hello. And I'll keep an eye out to see if we, who else we have along the board office.
As Commissioner, I know Commissioner Simmons is traveling today as well, and Commissioner Mohammed is on site at a school for some of the holiday gift giving activities. But are either of those individuals on?
Good morning, everyone. No.
Okay, we'll give 1 minute to give them, and then I'll go ahead and get started. And as I referenced, I'm also actually traveling, and where I may not have, I'm a little worried about my own connection. So if I cut at some point, I have asked Commissioner Ames Messenger to then complete the responsibilities of chairing the meeting. But for as long as I'm here, I'm happy to be here and asking questions because there's certainly some great things that are on the agenda and that I'm interested in talking through. So let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Committee Chair Andrew Coy. I'd like to welcome you all to this Monday, December 22nd, 2025 Operations Committee meeting. If you have not done so, please mute your phone. Anyone who does not mute your microphone, anyone who does not mute their phone may be muted by the call moderator and or removed from the call. I'll now read a roll call of the board to identify who is present. Please identify yourself first before speaking for the record. Commissioner Ames Messenger.
Ames Messenger present.
Commissioner Mohammed. Commissioner Simmons. Members of the public who would like to provide comment to the committee can do so by signing up the day before or the day before the meeting. Members of the public interested in submitting public comment during committee meetings may sign up by email only at public.comment@bcps.k12.md.us. 5 people or groups can sign up for public comment. Statement words may be read aloud by a member of the board staff. An email message attached to a 3-minute video that'll be broadcast during the meeting is also permitted. Finally, the chat function during our virtual meetings will not be used as a tool for gathering feedback or answering questions from the public. If you have follow-up questions or feedback to provide to the board, please email schoolboard@bcps.k12.md.us and the board office staff will provide a response to you. We have a number of items on the agenda today, including some fiscal year 2026 Q1 budget amendments for information and discussion. I'm happy to turn that over to the team who will be leading that. And with that, Mary Ann Cox.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. This is Mary Ann Cox. I'm the Deputy Chief Financial Officer for City Schools, and I'm here to present information for the FY 2026 Q1 budget amendments. I'm going to share my screen after a bit. I just wanted to give some summary comments initially. The review and approval of our quarterly budget amendments would be an action item for specific approval by the board. That purpose relates to compliance with multiple sections of the Maryland Annotated Code that require that you do not expend more in a category than you have appropriated. So this is how we move appropriations around. We give that option to our cost centers and schools to allow them to expend money through the year. I wanted to point out that this Q1 time period relates to any transactions that have occurred since the adoption of the original budget, which was adopted by the board on May 13th, 2025. And then our budget went to City Council for approval and then on to submission to MSDE. These quarterly budget amendments we bring to the board for review and approval are also part of an audit schedule that our auditors review during each annual audit of basic financial statements. It's due September each year, and they do that to make sure that we are in compliance with these various annotated code sections. So I will share my screen, and I'm going to show you the transactions. Okay, it says it's not visible. All right, try that again. All right, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm not seeing the.
Would it be helpful for someone from the board office to share for you, Marianne?
Yes, it would. Thank you.
Tanisha, that's.
Hi, Marianne. This is Yusuf. You can email it to me and I can share my screen.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
I'm going to try to share my screen as well. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, Sarita, if you can do it, it'd be great.
Yes, this would be the PDF that was, we submitted an update on Friday afternoon that had the ops committee date on the title page.
Okay,
So that
give
would
me
have
one
been
second.
Friday. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing now.
And Marianne, while they're pulling that up, if you want to continue, you can start talking about the different items.
Okay, certainly. I will do that. As soon as we get it up there, the budget amendment request is essentially an accounting transaction that requests to transfer budget dollars between either state categories or the budget, the objects, generally within the same department. And as I said, this particular Q1 covers the time period from the date of the original adoption through 9/30/2025. I'm going to offer some comments on the largest of the category changes. The first one is a change of $4.8 million from mid-level administration to instruction related to funds moved from the Fair Student Funding Reserve to academics for school-based costs. Thank you. If you could go to the next slide, please. Another major category. Yes. Okay. So it's the next one after that, please. Okay. The second category amendment noted is the funds that were moved from the Fair Student Funding Reserve that's associated with the schools to cover the costs of the FY 2026 MOED career coaching expenditures. And of course, MOED is the Mayor's Office of Employment Development, and that relates to the career coaching services that are offered to our students. Next slide, please. The next is a categorical reallocation from administration, which decreased by $5 million with an increase of $900,000 to student transportation, and operational plant increased by $4.1 million. Another significant category amendment was the movement of funds for tuition reimbursement to the Office of Human Capital, where the administration costs increased by 1.4 million and benefits decreased by 1.4 million. Could I have the next category, the next slide, please? And then, of course, we often have changes in needs for positions, and the P-STARS processing is the way that we move those funds around. And this particular one relates to abolishing the students with disability vacant positions. And you can see that the category 206 increased by 1.5 million and fixed charges decreased by 1.5 million. So next slide, please. The next two slides, actually the next three slides, relate to the summary, which is district-wide, all of the amendments. And you can see that they zero out on the bottom line, which is what they're supposed to do. There were no supplemental appropriations that were processed during the period through 9/30, processed and approved by the board. So there were no supplementals there. So all we did in the first quarter would be to reallocate the funds as I've just described. So the first template is schools and central office summary. If you could go to the next slide. The next slide, okay, sorry, is central office summary. You can see central office increased by 2.4 million. And then the next slide would be the schools. So the school summary decreased. And a lot of that is the movement of costs, because there are certain expenditures that we spend at the central office on behalf of the school. So some of that was just moving the money to where we could actually have the funds in the category so that we could spend it at the central office on behalf of the schools. If I could see the next slide, please. We also provide information about movement between objects. Generally, when we speak with reviewers of our financials, the object, the expenditures by object, budget by object, amendments by object are the ones that are clearer to reviewers of our financials. And that relates to things like the O100 is wages and salaries. The O200 object is benefits. The O3 is contractual services. The O4s is materials and supplies. O5s would be utility and other costs. O6 equipment. 7 and 8 relate to debt service, and 9 would be transfers. So again, for the object amendments, I'm going to speak about the largest changes that were processed through our system from the original adopted budget to the budget amendments processed through 9/30/2025. So again, we move money from the Fair Student Funding Reserve to academics for school-based costs. So salary and wages decreased by this 5.4 million, while contractual services increased by 5.4 million. We also had funds moved to the Office of Human Capital for the tuition reimbursement in the amount of 1.4 million, moving from moving from fringe benefits to contractual services. Next slide, please. Okay, this one is where we move funds from the contingency reserve. That is the district-wide contingency reserve, not the Fair Student Funding Reserve. This is for MSDE pre-K payments for $345,000. And the next one cited here again is that MOED career coaching reallocation for $750,000, which decreased salary and wages and increased contractual services, because that is the type of expenditure that is utilized when we pay the mayor's office. Next slide, please. And once again, by object, you will see that the consolidated schools and central office summary for the quarterly budget amendments would be zero. Because our budget did not change. There were supplemental appropriations that were processed and approved by the board through 9/30. So again, we just indicate that here's the consolidated one, and the next two slides will give us the same breakout by central office and schools. And if we could go to the next slide, please. This one, you can see there was a $4.8 million increase to budgets at the central office level, with a decrease on the next line from funds at the school, again, for expenditures that are made at the central office on behalf of the schools. So if you could complete going through the slides, I believe that is the last one with any information. The same thing we saw there, moving from the schools to the district office to spend on behalf of the schools. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them if I can, or get the information later if I need to.
Thank you for going over that. And thank you also for providing this information from these different vantage points to show the different pieces. I'll open it up, and I know, well, Commissioner Ains Messenger, if any of other commissioners have joined, please let me know, but I'll open it up if you have a question.
I did have two questions or points of clarification. The first one related to the tuition reimbursement. Was that an actual, like, was that for administrative costs within the Office of Human Capital, or is that the actual amount due in tuition to outside institutions?
It's my understanding that because of the way it's paid, I think originally it is budgeted as a benefit. But if our employees choose to go to certain universities, City Schools has a relationship with the universities where we pay them directly. Again, with clarification, I'll make sure that the courses are completed and the grades are high enough to get reimbursement. But in some situations, we pay the universities directly instead of paying our employees, reimbursing them. It's a matter of choice for the employees, and it's also relating to which universities they are.
That's wonderful. We've heard lots of feedback, and personally, I can attest, like, that is a wonderful option. So I'm glad.
Yes, it is.
That's being used.
Very nice.
That's
Yes.
excellent. The second point of clarification is more long-term, and so you might need to take it to someone or have someone be able to follow up. But just as we prepare for next year's budget season, looking at the funds going to MOED, realizing that some, if I'm remembering correctly, a lot of those are to comply with requirements under the AIB and the blueprint. But just
Yes,
looking in
that's right.
terms, just thinking about kind of what the delivery on those services, kind of why the funds were expected to be or were higher than they were expected, looking at kind of the relationship and preparing for the MOU with next year with the mayor's office, and also if there are other vendors or organizations that are also interested in participating, or are they subcontracting through the mayor's office. So just thinking logistically about why did that number come in higher than anticipated for that contract, and then kind of looking forward for next year, what should we be anticipating?
Certainly, I will reach out and get that information, and we will provide it to you.
And those are my
Thank
two
you.
big ones.
I do have a couple questions. And one of the acknowledgments that I have as I was looking through some of these numbers is these changes, if you look at the different categories, largely, if not completely, all of them are like 1% or less of a change from what was projected. But I did note that a number of these changes felt like they were moving from instruction to administration. And what I'm trying to understand, and this gets a little bit at Commissioner Ains Messenger's question, is the degree to which the categorization in the budget is that it is actually doing the exact thing that was designed to do. For example, with the tuition, that it's just a classification of how those dollars are being spent, but in effect, they are doing the exact same thing of paying the tuition, but it's just a matter of how those dollars are moved on an administrative level. Like understanding if that's the case is one broad question that I have. On some of them, when it moves from, from school-based to mid-level administration, I do have some broader questions, but I'd like to understand the degree to which these are purely administrative or these are actual differences in what is being spent. And a related part to this, a lot of this is also in comparison to the projected budget. So are these changes things that that you all, and I guess, how long have you anticipated these changes? Or, how much was it the original budget that was like, didn't know certain information that as it's become clear, these adjustments were made versus that something actually had to be changed in what was being administered?
Certainly, we'll get you clarification. Did you have specific questions from some of the slides that were presented, such as, I'm looking at the ones there we have from the Fair Student Funding Reserve to academics for school-based costs, where the mid-level increased by 4.8 million and instruction increased by 4.8 million. So what I think I hear is
by 4.8 million.
Instruction and category 0203 decreased by 4.8 million, category 0202 increase. Again, they're both school-based costs. It's perhaps part of it is what you were addressing, like was it perhaps a categorization issue in the original budget, or did we actually change the type of expenditures? That's what I think I'm hearing as your question.
Yeah, no, yes, you said that perfectly. That is my question of whether it was a categorization question or whether it was a change in actual plan. Yeah, the way you said it was perfect.
Okay, that's fine. So that's different from the MOED, but I see that 4.8 million there for going to mid-level. And was that the one that you wanted specific information about? I think we've already addressed the question of the tuition reimbursement.
Yeah, no, that would be illustrative to understand that one. So please, if you could speak to that.
Certainly, yes. I'll gather that information and submit it to you.
If
Boy,
I may,
were
I
you-
think I
Marion,
heard somebody
can you
else
hear me?
come off mute.
Go ahead.
Yes,
Okay.
Courtney. Yeah, hopefully I can be a little helpful with this. So a lot of this is really administrative. So it's just a matter of where we budget the funds initially and then where we expend it. So like in the case of MOED, those funds have to be budgeted as part of what we call our foundation dollars. And those are generally school-based dollars. But in order for us to actually make the payment and transfer the funds, we move them to a location where we can generate the purchase order, et cetera, to do the payment and processing. So it's similar in some ways to what we do with the tuition reimbursement. When we budget it initially, it's part of our fringe budget. But to expend it on a contract, it needs to be in our 0300 budgets. So we do that shift to move it into the HC so they can do the purchase order and contract process for that payment. So it's not a matter of the costs are different from what we anticipated or they're increased or they're higher or anything like that. These were planned and it's just administrative. It's just a matter of how we expend it being different from how it's budgeted or assigned.
Okay, that's really helpful because there were certainly two different ways I could interpret some of these. And one was that it was exactly what you described, an administrative ability to move the dollars to do the thing as designed. Now, did that also apply to some of the decreases in school-based expenditures that were talked about in the second half of the deck and going more to central office, or is that a different cause that has driven that?
Yeah, that's part of the same cost. So when we budgeted the funds for MOED, for example, initially we budget them in what we call the Fair Student Funding Reserve, which is school-based funds. And anything budgeted on the school-based side, for the most part, is budgeted in instruction or category 0203. When we move it from there to the central office, we move it essentially from instruction to administration as part of that transaction. It's just the MSDE category that's used. So that's why it looks like a transfer from like instruction to admin.
No, this is, I appreciate the description and the insight because certainly I'm sensitive to a feeling of dollars moving out of instruction at the school level to central office administration. And so, and I also recognize that the changes here that we're talking about, as I stated earlier, are 1% of the total for any of the different line items or less. So, it is, while the numbers are large of themselves, right, $5 million, $4.6 million, these things are not insignificant as a total percentage. And based off of what you're saying, that is administrative in nature, not changes in the intended, the budget design, if you will. That's really helpful.
Correct. Yeah.
Any other, Commissioner Messenger, any other questions that you have, or if there's any other commissioners that have joined, happy to entertain other questions on this deck.
Not to belabor the point on a Monday before the holiday break, but I did actually have a question building on that line, Coy. During the last board meeting, there was in testimony had been raised about concern of funds that had been in school, had gone unallocated, and are then moving back into the general fund. And I think, kind of to Coy's point, I'm less concerned about that specific movement, and I think more of that these budget processes can feel very opaque, and it's sometimes difficult to understand, and thinking about kind of how we can do a better job messaging that. And even if the principals understand, like, what does that look like in terms of messaging to the teacher, to the parent, to the variety of end users. So I think maybe now, and maybe this is something you can kind of touch on briefly, Courtney, but then I think for something us to revisit as we go into this next budget season, it's kind of a quick timeline of when those shifts happen, under the circumstances in which they happen, in which case that there would be funds that would be, unexpended at the school level. What are kind of the conditions for their movement back into the general district-wide budget? What are the typical things? When does that movement happen? Just in kind of broad strokes. And then we can kind of cover in the future, kind of logistically, what does that look like in terms of how can we do a better job messaging that to the broader community?
Sure. Any transactions that you see like that usually will not occur until the fourth quarter. And that will be part of our year-end budget closing process. We're closing our books for accounting. But schools have full duration of the fiscal year to extend the funding that they have. We also give updates to schools during the course of the year on their unspent OTPS, other than personnel dollars, so that they're aware of what their balances are and that they can spend them as well before we close the procurement process. But you don't see those transactions usually until the fourth quarter amendments. The items that you're seeing now in the first quarter, these are all pre-planned. So this is not moving any money from a particular school. This is money that was budgeted specifically for this purpose, like the MOED dollars that we're moving again for administrative purposes, but it's not pulling money out of schools or anything like that. Any unspent dollars, like I said, transactions like that you'd see in the fourth quarter.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you for that additional clarification on your question, helping. You're getting right at what I was thinking, Commissioner Messenger. Let's move on to the next item. And I had wondered, but I felt like you can just definitively answer this question as well. The next item talks about compensation of unaffiliated members in central office. I had wondered if that was part of the increase in the mid-level administration, but it does not appear that that is. Although, correct me if I'm wrong in piecing those together. But let's move on to policy GBCA compensation implementation update.
Okay, I'm sorry, Commissioner Coy, may I ask you if you are requesting additional information on those categorization questions, and changes, or if you have received sufficient information?
The answers there on my earlier questions were sufficient for today. So no
Okay,
need to follow
thank
up
you.
separately in writing. And I appreciated that insight there. The last question that I asked here was just verifying that when we talk about the GBCA compensation, that the changes that are being discussed here were not what was driving some of the increases in mid-level administration costs. I don't believe they were, but that was a wondering I had when I was reviewing materials ahead of time.
Okay, that is not my understanding, but we could listen to the next presentation when they talk about, the discussion of that policy. Because the GBs,
Yep.
yes, is that correct?
No, I'll turn it over. Yeah, no, that's correct. Let's go ahead and move to GBCA. And again, help. I appreciate the help as I'm not on Teams, but Director of Employment Engagement Zelda Johnson and Chief Emily Nelson. Turning it over to you all.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Board Operations Committee.
Good morning.
Good morning.
morning.
This update on policy GBCA, our compensation policy, is our annual update. As you may remember, 2 years ago in 2023, Human Capital submitted pretty significant revisions to policy GBCA, and the board asked us to provide an annual update on how the implementation of that policy was going. We're excited to be able to tell you a little bit more about, we have now completed the full implementation of the changes in GBCA. Zelda Johnson, our Director of Employee Engagement, who's been shepherding this work for the past 2 years, is unfortunately unable to join us today. So I'm excited to have Will Marcus, our Manager of Compensation on the Employee Engagement team, who's here and will be presenting this brief update we have on policy GBCA implementation. I'll turn it over to you, Will.
Thank you, Chief Emily. Good morning, everyone. My name is William Marcus. I'm the Compensation Manager here with Baltimore City Public Schools. I'm here to provide you an update on the GBCA policy regarding compensation. Next slide. As previously mentioned, policy GBCA supports all 7 board priorities. However, it directly relates to the priorities 2, 5, and 7. This policy impacts all employees of city schools. Next slide. There are several goals in updating policy GBCA. However, we focused on ensuring the policy complies with bargaining agreements and aligns with our procedures. Next slide. As a reminder, here are our compensation philosophies and values. Our values will remain the heart of our compensation philosophy, which centers on equity, fairness, and transparency. As a part of implementation of unaffiliated compensation pay scales were aligned with increases negotiated by union represented groups. And as of July 1, 2025, unaffiliated employees were eligible for interval movements based on their annual evaluations. This was assessed using our newly implemented evaluation system called the District Leader Effectiveness Evaluation. Next slide. As you can see, in FY26, 80% or above all employees across the bargaining unit receive interval movements based on their annual evaluation ratings. Next slide. This concludes our brief update of the GBCA compensation policy, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Commissioner Messenger, do you have any questions?
I'll let you start out.
So a couple of questions that I have as I was reviewing this. When you have the interval movements by union, I wasn't seeing what the interval movements were by unaffiliated. Was that contained in here, or is that information that you all have? Just to help me understand as I was interpreting this.
Yeah, we have that.
Comparison.
We have that information. It wasn't on that slide, but we do have that information.
Ayanna, could you put that
Brett,
slide up though again with the graph?
Yeah, and perhaps one of my broad comments just to give insight into
Oh,
my
what it is on the
orientation.
slide actually. It's on the slide. 94%.
Which one is it?
GSS.
Oh, GSS. Okay, that's the unaffiliated. I was looking through the different ones, but I appreciate you going back to that slide. So, one of the broad sort of orientations that I'll provide into how I'm seeing this. First off, I do think it's really important for all the reasons that you outlined in terms of the compensation philosophy and values. And one that I will underscore is also the competitiveness, right? Maintaining a strong ability to attract, retain, and compensate all employees. And certainly those that are in unions have a defined structure to negotiate as a body around those things. But I do think, it's important to just name that all, like, city schools considers all of its employees and wants to ensure that those things are done irrespective of bargaining unit. And so I applaud that intentionality from, as Chief Nielsen referenced, from a couple of years ago as a major push. And I do think this is one of the benefits of having the tenure and the just the stability that the district has for the past 10 years to be able to look at these sorts of things and have a broader plan and structure, because I can easily imagine that this is a category that just is otherwise overlooked perhaps, but otherwise there's not a forcing function to do this. It has to be internally driven. So I just wanted to lift that up and give that insight into how I'm interpreting and seeing this, and applaud that thoughtfulness as it relates to this. And so with that, now looking at the unaffiliated at 94%, I appreciate seeing kind of that spread. And am I interpreting then that the interval movements at 94% is what that representing is of all the individuals who are unaffiliated, which are, you could tell me if exclusively, but predominantly all at central office, based off of their performance reviews, fell within the range that you've shown here, that it is not remarkably outside of what other union-based positions changed in terms of intervals. That's what I'm to understand from this chart.
Correct.
Okay, I appreciate that. Commissioner Ames Messenger, any questions from you on this report update?
Nothing specific, just for framing, I'm recollecting the unaffiliated, that is ballpark. How many members are we talking about?
We're talking about roughly 90 members.
Okay, that was what my
Of firm
recollection
staff.
was. Thank you. Thanks so much.
And then
no other
just to answer
question.
that question okay, and to answer the question that I'd asked at in between the two presentations, I would interpret many of the unaffiliated positions at North Avenue as being mid-level administration. Is that an accurate classification of like what many of these positions are, or how would they be classified in the levels of administration?
I would say mid-level to upper. I wouldn't just say.
Yeah, there are most
mid-level.
senior administrators for the most part.
Right.
Yeah,
Where they
certainly
have
there
a
are many
role
that are
in
upper.
negotiation
that are upper
and
level.
compensation.
Yep. And then the changes that were discussed earlier in Q1 budget is not
Okay, let me just-
caused by these changes, correct?
I'll pass on and identify.
Sorry, we're
Okay,
getting
okay,
a
no
hot
problem.
mic from someone.
Background
I can't
noise.
tell if that's background noise with you, Commissioner Coy.
It's not on my side.
No, I
It's not
think
on
it
my
was
side.
in payroll. Yeah. It's off now, though.
Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Would
So
you mind
my
repeating
question-
the end of your question, Commissioner Coy?
Of course. So our earlier discussion about the increases in mid-level administration costs, I just want to verify that these changes that were discussed here about the step movements, these increases were not related to those increases that were represented previously. That was my wondering, that I interpreted the previous presentation, but want to just verify that that is indeed the case.
I can help
To
with
my
that,
knowledge, that is correct.
Emily.
Okay.
Sorry, what was that,
Thank you for
Courtney?
verifying.
No, I was saying I could answer that if you'd like, Chief Emily. Those are unrelated, Commissioner Coy. The changes that you're seeing here are not related to what was in the amendments. We did, in predicting or in anticipating the budgets for the fiscal year, incorporate some of these average salary and position cost changes. So we didn't have to do budget amendments because of those.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I think that that is a beneficial thing because, especially for any members of the public that are watching, these two things being in back-to-back, it would not have surprised me if others had a wondering or had jumped to an assumption based off of that. So having that affirmative response from you that they are unrelated is appreciated. Let's move on to item 2.03, the fiscal year 26 supplemental appropriations.
Okay, good morning again. This is Mary Cox, the Deputy Chief Financial Officer for City Schools, and I'm here to present some information along with Cindy Smith from Operations regarding the request for an FY26 supplemental appropriation for the Robb Street Fire Alarm and Sprinkler Project. Again, this is an action item for board approval. This is basically an accounting transaction which transfers fund balance from the general fund, assigned fund balance, to the capital projects fund, which gives them the funding that they can then create purchase orders and so forth for these individual projects. Please remember that this is a transfer from assigned fund balance for the general fund, and those the assigned fund balance transfers relate to board policy DIG fund balance, wherein the CEO, as the board designee, has the authority to place projects and amounts in the assigned fund balance, which she would do after consultation with the cabinet for system priorities. So the CEO, as the board designee, approves the placement of the projects in general fund assigned fund balance, and then finance comes to the board to request approval to transfer those fund balance amounts to generally the capital projects fund so that they may proceed with their capital project. I also want to note that for the supplemental appropriations which relate to capital projects coming from the general fund, they are related to board priorities 3, 5, and 7 as they relate to facilities and the environment in our schools. So I believe that we're going to share the screen for the supplemental appropriation. If you could, please. Okay, and this particular one is the support documentation for the non-academic district consolidation plan. I did want to note that in the CEO placement of the assigned fund balance in the general fund balance, there was a total of 3.3 million for this non-academic building district consolidation plan, of which only $830,000 is now being requested relating to the Robb Street fire alarm and the sprinkler project. So I'm not sure if Cindy Smith is at the meeting now where she could give some additional clarification on this project.
Yes, you can hear me, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good.
Yes, we can hear
So,
you.
hi. So this is Cindy Smith, Executive Director of Capital Projects. This particular item is as part of the non-academic building consolidation plan, as Mary Ann mentioned. This is something that was voted on and approved in the CEFMP this year regarding how we wanted to really consolidate and save some money then on our non-academic buildings, as well as do the improvements that were needed to make them really, usable and, for staff and our employees. Robb Street is the facility where contract maintenance is. And some of our other support teams, mechanical services has moved out of there for the most part, so it is mostly contract maintenance. They do not have a sprinkler, and their fire alarm does not work right now. So if we had any kind of incident at that building where we are doing things like repairs of equipment and things like that before we're putting it back in service, it could be a catastrophe. So this project would replace their fire alarm and install a sprinkler.
Thank you for that additional detail. Commissioner Ames-Messenger, any questions from you on this?
No question specifically on this. Well, I have one broad question, but go ahead, Coy, if you had questions on this first.
No questions from me.
Oh, some of this you had mentioned, Cindy, that this had come up several times, and that part of that plan was delayed when we had the unexpected non-reimbursement of funds. Is the remainder of that plan back on track, or what's kind of the anticipated trajectory of the rest of this? Because I think this speaks to the fact that these are not small or unnecessary changes. These are like critical safety investments, as well as like part of a longer term cost saving effort, which your office does so brilliantly. So I think maybe this is a good moment to pause and reflect of what is the hope to return to the rest of that plan.
Certainly mentioned that. So the 3 point, I believe it was 3.3, 3.4 that Mary Ann mentioned, that was originally held aside for the non-academic building district consolidation plan. All of the rest of that outside of this 830 is still on hold. There were a variety of projects in that, and to be honest, I don't remember what all they were at this point. I'd have to go back and look them all up, but there were a variety of other projects that were as part of that are on hold at this time until some of that funding is clarified and made sure that we're still getting it.
Thank you. I would say more to look forward to in future budget years. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, let's proceed to the next item on the agenda, 3.01 compliance report, JFB, student enrollment.
Thank you.
Good morning.
And with these, I guess with these two, is there a presentation for these or just discussion of the items?
For JFB, or just discussion?
Okay.
All right, so good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Brandon Tillman. I serve as the Director of Enrollment Choice and Transfer Office. I am joined here by several other representatives of our enrollment ecosystem, as well as our data partners from OAA. This compliance report fulfills the annual yearly requirement to talk about the official district enrollment counts from the previous year, some grade level and demographic trends that we're seeing, and just entry patterns. If we scroll down, we will see that again, for school year 24-25, our total enrollment was 76,841 students. That represented a net increase of about 1,000 students, which is 1.4% growth from the previous year, 23-24, signaling that we had an element of enrollment stabilization, which aligns very closely with the board's strategic objective of strengthening enrollment. If we go down to some of the trends that we are scrolling through, I will highlight that we did see our pre-K enrollment to have a slight decline of about 100 students. This is aligned with some of the things that we're seeing in early childhood participation, as well as some of the city demographic shifts that we're noticing, inclusive of declining birth rates. I will just have a reminder that our pre-K is not a mandatory grade level. So the good news is that when we look at our compulsory grade levels of kindergarten through grade 12, we saw an increase in every single enrollment band that we have for that particular school year. As we would go down to looking at our demographics through the lens of race and ethnicity, we will see notable changes in our Hispanic Latino enrollment, which increased by 1,300 students. 1,323 to be exact. We also saw a decrease in our Black African American enrollment of about 485 students. And I will highlight that the decline in the Black African American enrollment clearly mirrors some of the population shifts that we're seeing in the city of Baltimore. So it represents a broader demographic shift rather than a specific district issue. As we will also note, the growth in our Hispanic and Latino population partially offset some of the overall enrollment declines that we're seeing in some of our neighboring school districts, which contributed to the enrollment stabilization that we had for school year 24-25. If we will scroll down a little bit more, we'll see that the district continues to experience a level of significant student mobility, as reflected in some of the entry codes that we have here. We'll note that 1,300 students returned from public schools in other states. We had over 2,300 students return from other school districts throughout the state of Maryland. We had over 1,000 students that came to us from other countries. So these patterns really underscore kind of the unique nature of enrollment in what we'll call a large urban school system. One other change to this particular report is this year we did put in information about some of the September attendance adjustments. So I will say, as we think about post-submissions to the September attendance file, we did see 95 students that we have previously thought were eligible for funding, but ended up due to such things as retroactive withdrawals and verification of no days of attendance that were not found to be eligible. So we have 58 retroactive withdrawals, 32 attendance verification issues, and then 5 students that were in both categories. Another element that we didn't include was about our withdrawal and due diligence protocol, which we have worked on as a district. It consists of multiple documented outreach attempts, home visits, and additional safeguards for our students that are experiencing homelessness or our students with disabilities. What we will see is that while the numbers have doubled since we started really tracking this in school year 1920. We would say for the last 3 years, it has remained stable with a report out for school year 24-25 of roughly 2,257 students. Which again kind of highlights the operational reality of the student mobility in the urban school district. Overall, the data in this particular report shows the enrollment growth as a system, certainly against the landscape of other neighboring school districts that experience a decline. But it still highlights our need to retain our currently enrolled students, to re-engage those students that maybe have withdrawn for whatever reason, and to actively recruit new students into the system. I would say kind of the takeaway is that we are fully compliant with our board policy. Our enrollment is trending upward as of 24-25, and the demographic shifts that we are seeing do mirror what we are seeing in the city of Baltimore, and not necessarily a specific district-wide issue. And that kind of concludes the kind of data highlights of enrollment for school year 24-25.
Thank you for that overview. Commissioner Messenger, any questions from you?
I did have a couple. Looking first at the pre-K enrollment, and again, that makes sense in terms of where this is following. Just specifically, we're looking at pre-K being down about 100, which is, in the scheme of things, not horrible, but in that has traditionally been an area of strength for Baltimore and the strength of our programming. I was just looking at kind of what are some of the initial analysis of why enrollment dipped. Is it looking at people didn't get the seats that they wanted, people were frustrated about the enrollment process? Are we seeing those trends across other districts? Although obviously we're dealing with a very different ecosystem when it comes to pre-K here than a lot of our surrounding districts, but kind of what's the initial analysis of the decline?
Sure. So when we look at just kind of participation in what we're going to call kind of early childhood education, district-wide, not district-wide, statewide, I mean, we're seeing the same kind of shift and decline. Certainly, when we look at Maryland and we look at specifically Baltimore, we know that our birth rates have trended downward. And also, I'm going to say for Baltimore, we know that we've seen a shift in our population that has declined. And I should say our our adults that have children at this particular age range, we've done some analysis to see that that was a shift in looking at some of the data stats from the city. So we're seeing that piece. Certainly, we did roll out a new system, so that we didn't find that had a major part in this particular decline, but certainly we are doing more this year as a lesson learned to kind of boost our marketing and advertising efforts in those communities that we saw had low enrollment. We're working very closely with those particular school communities to do some things differently and kind of have some shadow days and things of that nature to kind of boost in that particular element. So hopefully we'll see some stabilization as we move forward. But overall, it mirrors what we saw in some of our neighboring school districts as relates to the decline. And actually, we fared much better than some of our neighboring districts, such as Baltimore County.
I would say I have several commissioners, so this is usually their platform, but I will jump on it. I think looking at that, I appreciate the looking at shadows and looking kind of intuition. I would be interested looking forward, just looking at a breakdown of those kindergarten students, of the number of students that are coming in from private pre-K as opposed to city programs. And then, or Head Start or whatever else, is it that they're coming in having not engaged in earlier education opportunities, or, are kind of where are people coming pre-kindergarten because pre-K is not mandatory. And then I think looking just the more that we can be doing to examine what is happening in private spaces in early childhood, just as we all find our kind of next iteration of what quote unquote normal is post-COVID, if curious, and just my ongoing concern is that as we are missing kids that are coming in pre-K, that those are students that are missing the amazing things that are happening in city schools all the way through 12, which I know is a concern you share as well. But I think the more data that we can have around what's happening in the private sector, what's happening in surrounding counties, what's happening with, Head Start and other early child care pipelines and private pipelines, the more data, the better for me. So I would be interested in following up on this conversation. My second question actually is another key transition year is looking at that 9th grade. And so I guess I'll just start by wondering too, what is happening when we look at the flow to surrounding LEAs, what's the trends that we're seeing in other places, kind of what is this dip an anomaly for this year? Do we see these dips frequently, and looking kind of at what's the best analysis of where those students are going? Are they going to private schools, or are they going to surrounding LEAs? But just a little bit, if you had any insight into that 9th grade dip.
So certainly we'll have to kind of look a little bit closer to kind of analyze where folks are going. I know that when we look at the 9th grade drop, that has been consistent for us for 2 or 3 years. And I know it kind of aligns with some of the shifts that we had in some of our grading and promotional things, policies and regulations. But certainly we can definitely take that as a element to kind of do additional research and circle back with you.
Can I ask a clarification on that? So are you saying that it has to do with the fact that we're seeing lower enrollment in 9th grade because students are being retained in 8th grade, or that they are, based on these changes in policies, students are then opting to go somewhere else?
We actually saw a combination of both. And I don't have the data stats in front of me for 24-25, but I can certainly follow back up with you on that.
And I would say I hate to create extra work, but this is really important, especially as we keep talking about transition. So that I think also with just some longitudinal perspective of what that looks like going back within the last, I'm post COVID, because at some point we're in a different universe now, but like looking over the last couple of years, although actually I guess pre-COVID to kind of get a benchmark, going back, 2017 or whenever would be helpful as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And then my final question, I promise, Coy, sorry, is more of a technical question looking at the report. I'm looking specifically at the E10 and R10, but when we're looking at the return or the transfer from another school in the same LEA, it's looking like that's just under 16,000. Is that how much of that number is students that, like are enrolling in a different or transferring or transitioning to a new school because they're going from 8th grade to 9th grade and everybody is, and how much of that is kind of internal mobility within the district that are because students are transferring because, there's a behavior issue, they moved, or they had, they didn't like the kid sitting next to them on the bus, like whatever reason, like many also valid reasons. How much of that is just kind of traditional matriculation and how much of that is because there was another specific cause?
So I'm going to say the E10s are those that were prompted by some type of action from the enrollment offices. Usually the R10s are kind of the rollover elements. I'm not sure if one of my partners from our data team are on here from OAA to join us, but we can certainly dig into that as well. But usually the R10s are those that are automatic rollovers from the system.
That makes sense.
And the E10s are those that are prompted by specific action.
That's
And we
correct,
get
Brandon.
I would say, and then for either of you, do we get an additional, and some of this is, I feel like I've seen this report, and if it could be from policy and we're going to get it shortly, that's fine. Do we get an additional breakdown? We get an additional breakdown of those E10 transfer codes of why, like, of their reason for the transfer. Is that correct?
Yes, that's policy JFC. So
Thank
different
you. All right.
report, but coming up.
But it's coming up soon, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Then I will hold that question and take a look out for it. Thank you so much.
No problem.
No, and I appreciated those questions, Commissioner Ames Messenger, and you asked many of the ones that I was interested in. My only additional question is, in your overview of the compliance report, you referenced students returning, and I was curious if that was if we, to the degree to which you have data that when a student was with us, goes somewhere else and then comes back, that we are able to see that, or if by returning you just meant the students coming to our district, and I misheard what you were saying.
No, so return is they were once with us, and for whatever reason they may have transferred to a different LEA, and then they're now returning back to us. So the return is definitely referring to students that once were City School students and now are coming back to us. Whereas for those that are transferring in, we would consider them kind of the new students, so they would not be represented in the R codes.
Great. No, that's great to understand, and appreciate you highlighting that in your overview. Okay, let's move on to the next item, compliance report DIG, fund balance.
Good day, Commissioner. There isn't a presentation.
Is this you presenting on this one? Yeah, or are you talking about it? Okay, great. Yeah, no, I don't expect a presentation.
If you have questions, we're happy to take.
Commissioner Ames Messenger, do you have any questions on this report?
I actually did not. I'm sure you'll all be relieved here.
No, you're totally fine. As it relates to this report, maybe less of a question and more of a continuation of a previous comment. Certainly wanting to just highlight for you all two things, specifically in finance. One is, as I've talked to other commissioners, there is a high degree of confidence in the work that you all do. the thoughtfulness, the thoroughness, the experience. Just want to underscore and applaud, you all on the finance team for that work, and add that there's an increased interest from the board office, in really thinking about how do we, what is the board's role from a government perspective.
Boy, you're cutting out a little bit.
There's not a specific concrete question here. Happy to. The note is just that the board is going to be spending more time thinking about what our role is, and especially given the uncertainties in the broader ecosystem, the macro environment, making sure that we have a robust, healthy, reserve funds and reserve balances is something that I know the board, other commissioners are interested in. So no specific questions, but just wanted to share our confidence in you all and our desire to engage in this.
Coy, you
I
were
appreciate
breaking
that,
up a little bit, but I will jump in the chat and say that I definitely agree that you're like making sure that we have healthy fund balances. I've appreciated the fiscal approach of the leadership over the last 10 years and to lean in on that. Sorry, Courtney. Were there other things, Coy? It was hard. I just was flagging so that it was hard to hear a lot of the middle of what you had said, but I will tap into Courtney. Sorry.
I was just going to say, we're of course available to answer any questions that the board may have, or if there are specific items that the board wants more detail on, we're happy to meet and discuss.
Commissioner Coy, are you still with us?
Commissioner Ace Messenger, this is Yusuf. I think he lost signal and dropped off the call.
All right. So as the remaining individual standing, Yusuf, I might need some help making sure there's nothing else we need to do. As I am the only member, I would move, first of all, I guess wishing everyone happy holidays on this last, oh, we're back? Nope. Wishing happy holidays on, and just for everyone to rest and take care, and thank you for your faithful service to the district. It is greatly appreciated. We're all able to do it because largely the work of this operations folks. And so with that, I guess I move to close the last operations meeting of the year.
Oh,
Yusuf,
the
there you go.
procurement agenda.
Oh,
the
perfect.
procurement
Oh,
sec-
right. There you go. Thank you, Yusuf. That was not on my thing. Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead. Proceed.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to.
No,
make
that's
sure.
very important. Thank you. I was too excited.
Right, so we just have 5 quick items for procurement, and these will all be on the January 6th agenda in 2026. The first item is the Chief Operating Officer, and this is for D Project Inc. And this is the Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract with D Project Inc. in the total amount of $2,022,900. And this is for a roof replacement services at Francis M. Wood Building, 176. Section 15.2, the Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a contract with JLT Trucking to provide citywide waste collection and disposal services. This is an estimated annual contract amount of $2 million, and the contract term is January 7th, 2026 through January 6th, 2029, and it includes 1 2-year renewal option. Section 15. Oh, sorry. Any questions?
No questions.
All right, section 15.3. This is a contract increase with Fleet Enterprise Fleet Management. And the Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operations Officer request the board's approval to increase a contract with Enterprise Fleet Management to provide vehicle leasing, maintenance, and fuel services. And the board is requested to increase the estimated annual contract amount from $2 million to $2,750,000 annually. And this is an annual increase of $750,000. And the current contract term is July 24th, 2019 through December 31st, 2026.
I did have a quick question on this of clarification. You have a number of folks, our departments listed, including transportation. And I was wondering, are these the vans that they had, the 15 passenger vans that they had been using to expand flexibility? If you don't remember, it's fine. But
that's a separate contract. We use Enterprise Fleet Management both for the purchase of vans, and this is for leasing and maintenance services. This is a separate piggyback agreement.
okay. Okay. I will follow up with an email on the question, and I'll follow up to make sure there aren't any other questions prior to the meeting with board colleagues. Sorry, you can go ahead, continue.
Section 15.4. This is the Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval to increase the total contract amount with CNN Associates from $1,740,335 to $1,790,823.73. And this is for a window and door replacement at Lakeland Pre-K to 8 school. And then the last item, section 15.5, this is a contract increase for on-call engineering and consulting services. The Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval to increase the on-call engineering consulting services contract with multiple vendors from $30 million to $48 million. And this is an increase of $18 million. And this is for the additional contract year. So the current contract term is October 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2026.
I have no questions on any of those, but I'll follow up with Chair Coy to make sure that there isn't anything else that others are aware of. But thank you for that reminder. Yusuf, is there anything else on the agenda that we need to be mindful of before we close? And
I believe we are good to close.
so I'm going to move that we close the meeting, and considering it's just me, I'll say aye, and I guess I am the majority. So with that, have a wonderful holiday season, everyone, and be well.
Thank you. Happy holidays to you as well.
You too. Travel and be healthy, everyone.
Happy holidays, everyone. Take care.
Happy holidays.